What a beautiful presentation table. Lots of Papa's favorite things. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our celebration of the life of a remarkable husband, father, Papa, cousin, teacher, coach, and friend from the heart forever, Larry Ethier. My name is Bill Bellows, and I am honored to act as your Master of Ceremonies as we sketch a portrait of Larry's character, strong family values, unfailing positive outlook, and keen interest in and impact on family, students, athletes, schools, and friends from around the world. On behalf of Deb, Melanie and Chris, Neil and Sarah, Lucas and Devon, Larry's beloved grandchildren, Cade, Brooke, Thomas, Nixon, Charlie, Avie Jane, and Maeve, thank you for being part of the portrait. Larry was born on February 20th, 1948, in Edmonton, the first son to Leo and Verna. A brother, Randy, would follow 4 years later. The family moved to Grimshaw for a year before settling back in Edmonton in the Bondy Doon area for the next 4 years. Leo bought a lot on the St. Albert Trail and began to build their new home. That's where my connection began as my uncle bought the lot next door and my dad helped him build the home. While Leo was building, the family moved in with Aunt Frida and Uncle Earl of Pelican fame. The Pelican would become a huge part of Larry's, Deb's, and their kids' lives. Leo and Verna lived strong family values consisting of responsibility for, commitment, warmth, caring, and sharing. Larry grabbed onto these values and lived them every day of his life. To speak about Larry and family will be Larry's brother Randy, followed by cousins Danny Ethier and Judy Aikenhead.
Thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk about Larry. I've been thinking about this and reflecting about it for a very long time, over a long plane ride to get here. What can I really say about Larry other than he was my big brother? He may have seemed like a brother to a lot of you here today, so imagine what he was like for me. Always there, always caring, always helping, always supporting, and mostly of all, always loving. As we grew up, we grew apart, but only geographically. Larry and his family were always in our thoughts, as I'm sure we were always in his. The visits were sometimes infrequent, but always genuine, quality visits. I could go over several good memories in several different countries, but it would take me forever to give just a glimpse of what Larry was for me. So all I can say is that Larry to me was simply my big brother. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Don't break it. Oh, I think I did. Should be good. My name is Dennis Ethier. Leo, Larry's father, and my father, Roger, were brothers. Verna, Larry's mom, and my mother were sisters. That's right, 2 brothers married 2 sisters. So As I'm supposed to speak to Larry from the cousin's perspective, I feel more like, as you said, Randy, I've lost a brother more than a cousin. One of my early memories, as had been stated earlier, was the Pellick Inn. That's a family food booth at the Edmonton Exhibition, where you might hear Larry bark out something like, "A loaf of bread, a pound of meat, and all the onions you can eat, by golly, but they're good. They're all red ready and they're all red hot with a weenie in the middle and a pickle on top." At the Gray Ethier family reunion, Larry was usually doing burgers on the barbecue or roasting a pork loin for the masses, always making everyone present feel welcomed and valued. The food thing continued. He loved his Hawkins cheesies or home-baked chocolate chip cookies. He felt it was a form of spousal abuse, and he'd tell my wife this often, spousal abuse if there wasn't dessert at every dinner. At one family reunion, cousin Alan Gray had taken my windsurfer. Alan's here today, he probably remembers this. And he was repeatedly being blown out into the lake. I have a kayak that served as the recovery vessel to pull the windsurfer back into that offshore breeze. I'd been called back to the hospital on an emergency, so I had to leave. Larry said, "I'll get him." So Larry stepped up to do the rescue. He was going to settle himself down into the kayak. Unfortunately, his hips weren't quite the right size. So Larry Ethier out, another cousin at the time, Larry Antoniak in. Now Larry Antoniak had much more slender hips, and he could get into the kayak, but he was also directionally challenged. As I left for the hospital, I saw the kayak spinning in circles, sort of in the way of Alan's direction. The stories are too many to share, but certainly we have all been welcomed and valued by our amazing cousin Larry. Take it away, Niner.
I have to figure out how to do this. Larry had 44 first cousins, 21 on his dad's side, 23 on his mom's. On the Ethier side, we recently developed a numbering system based on our birth order, which we thought would help keep us straight. Larry was number 8, I'm number 9, and Denny here is number 10. As kids growing up in Edmonton in the 1940s and 1950s, we led charmed lives, endless hours of family fun, surrounded by loving aunts, uncles, and grandparents who didn't have a lot of money, but learned to create their own entertainment. Family get-togethers occurred frequently, and we were lucky to have our very own farm and our very own lake. Our Aunt Jean lived on a farm just north of St. Albert, and it was a favorite destination for all of us. It was here that we learned valuable life skills, the most important one being not to believe everything our country cousins told us. Turns out we city slickers were pretty darn gullible. Our grandparents lived at Alberta Beach, where they hosted a family reunion every Father's Day. Family reunion could be loosely translated to mean a keg of beer, an overabundance of food, and hours of boisterous card playing. As Ethiers, we learned early on to play cards, have fun, and laugh a lot. The ambition of every Ethier cousin was to be old enough to be allowed to sit at the adult table to play cards. Larry was quite simply the best cousin ever. He loved to tease and he loved to laugh, but his greatest gift was his ability to make everyone feel special. It might be a look or a nickname or a favorite ritual, but if you were in Larry's life, you knew you were special. I believe Larry may have inherited this gift from our grandmother because all 23 of us thought we were her favorite. Our grandmother, Mame as we called her, would often greet or leave us with her special term of endearment as she stroked our cheeks. And so to you, dear Larry, Denny and I say, Manouche, Manouche, and we will miss you.
Thank you, Denny and Judy. That was wonderful. I believe that Larry was such a good friend to so many because just with his family, Larry genuinely cared for, was interested in, and nurtured his friendships. With Larry, you were a friend forever and part of his ever-expanding kind of family. By age 12, though, Larry was becoming fully integrated into the Dovercourt neighborhood, where he really preferred playing football and baseball with his friends. As many of you know, Larry was musically gifted, and by age 5, he was singing in the Harry Farmers Boys choir. He also worked hard at mastering the clarinet. It was at this point, during a clarinet practice with his mom, that he stopped and said, "You are a mad musician, and I'm going outside to play with my friends." He then broke the clarinet over his knee and never played it again. A new side to Larry. Larry became extremely active in school and the United Church's High C program. He was a Ross Shep's radio DJ, was a class historian his graduating year. That year at age 17, he was named Mr. Edmonton, representing the High C. He's been razzed about that for the last 50 or so years. The U of A followed, and Larry joined the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity, where we reconnected. He played bridge, went to movies, attended dances, and actually returned to music by starring in Once Upon a Mattress, where a 15-year-old Deb would see, and for the first time, her 17-year-old husband-to-be. Deb thought he was funny. Larry was enrolled in honors zoology. The problem is, by the end of his third year, Larry was having too much fun. And while the faculty granted him his 3-year Bachelor of Science, he would have to take a break from the 4 years honors program to have a year-long Dean's vacation from university. So Larry went backpacking, solo. He decided to do Europe on $1 a day. And he loved to report that he lived on potato skin soup, and that he was in a cave, I think in Crete, until the money totally ran out, and he was forced to return. His good friend, Gavin Duke, writes of that time. "I first met Larry at Ross Shep in 1963. Big, friendly guy with a big smile. Just like Dick Clark. He didn't seem to change right up to the last time I saw him in January, 2017. Our orbits intersected less frequently in high school than later on. He had dates. I had none. Believe it or not, it was in my first year of university that Larry introduced me to beer. Thanks to that experience, I've had very few clear Saturday mornings since then. When my wife Lori and I were reminiscing about Larry, Deb, and their family, warmth was the word that always came up. They showed that a family with 3 kids could be civil to one another. When parenting controversies arose in our house, the go-to philosophy was, how would the Ethiers handle this? The Ethiers' door was always open, and you were welcomed as one of the family. One year, Laurie was working in Japan over Thanksgiving and feeling guilty and lonely about being away from home and our 3 kids. No problem, turkey dinner at the Ethiers, just like being at home. Living in different cities, we would only see Larry and Debbie once or twice a year. but each visit was like we were next door neighbors, warm and comfortable, always interested in our lives, and particularly in what the kids were doing. Thanks, Gavin. We have a special person who would like to say something as well. One of Larry's great friends is Bill Hoffman. Bill's been struggling, and he really didn't think he'd be able to come today, but he's stepped up to the plate, and he'd like to say a couple of things about his friend, Larry.
This is strange. These guys never have done what I'd asked them before. What they pay these guys, it's too much. Can you put that down? Can you adjust here? Yeah, right there. Just turn that thing there. Thank you, William. Well, good afternoon. My name is Bill Hoffman, and it's very glad to see you. I can't see much of you, but it's nice to see you all here. I have one small complaint, though. Did you notice that picture that was up on the screen? And you notice that picture down in front of Larry? What is the consistent thing about those two pictures? Who can answer that for me? Come on, loud. A big smile. And I don't see enough smiles out there. So I'd like you all to get the biggest possible smile you can get on your faces, because we're talking about Larry Ethier here, the man that always smiled about everything. And I just got a couple of little stories to tell, and my job was to talk about friendship and what it takes to be a true friend. And Larry and I were fast friends when we were younger. On September 4th, Tuesday, September 4th, 1962, I entered a strange building. It was a high school. And Gavin and I should have introduced Gavin. This is Gavin Duke, he was mentioned before. Gavin and I have been fast friends since we were 6 years of age. But we showed up at Ross Shepherd Composite High School. And we'd come from a smaller junior high school, as Larry had, and we were a little nervous. But after the first little while, we were in different classes, but first class was over, we went out, looked at each other and said, this maybe will work really well. Except there's a strange sound I hear in that room down at the end of the hall. So we meandered down to the end of the hall. Someone was singing in the hallway of a high school. Who could it possibly be? And they were singing Moonlight Bay. Well, think back to your grade 10 year. Did you start the year, first day, grade 10, strange school, by singing Moonlight Bay and convincing 3 other yahoos to sing Moonlight Bay and form a quartet? Guess who did that? Who did that? Larry. A little louder. Larry. Oh, you can get louder for Larry. Come on. Larry. Darn right, it's Larry. By the first week, I was singing with him as well. To try and get Gavin Duke to sing would be kind of impossible. When we were at university, we managed to join the same fraternity. We were in different faculties, however. But they had a big event they called Songfest. And they got every single member out, and some who we thought were half not with it, but anyone that could walk. I would have qualified back in those days, put it that way. So we all got on this choral event. It was called Songfest, and we had to sing a song. However, there was about 10% that just couldn't sing. Well, I've managed to get Gav up here, somehow convince him to come up and assist me. But my real agenda is to get Gavin to sing for Larry. Gavin has never sung a note in his life. Well, he sang one note and then they stopped him. And they said, stop, we've got a role for you in Songfest though. It's called Mouther. You will sing like this. And he did through the entire song. You should try sometimes. It's difficult. Oh, look at how nervous Gav is. He thinks you are actually going to make him do this. Actually, you should all be nervous because I'm going to do two things. And the first one is, I told my little story about Larry's breaking into song. Well, I'm going to stand up. And you're all going to stand up. If you can, as long as it's healthy. Okay. Good work. You're farther away from that song now. Now, I don't know if you know the song or not. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to ask each and every one of you to sing along for Larry. And it's Moonlight Bay. Now, I'll hum one verse, and then we'll sing one verse. How many people actually know the song, Moonlight Bay? I'm looking for another hand. Well, I'll just sing a little. We were sailing along on Moonlight Bay. You could hear the voices ringing. They seemed to say, a little bit louder now, a little bit louder, you have stolen my heart. Now don't go away, hey, hey, hey. As we sang love's old sweet song on Moonlight Bay, on Moonlight Bay. No, don't sit down. That wasn't near loud enough. Stand up. Now we're going to sing one for Larry. Just got to do two things. This is going to, oh, that's good. Yeah, thanks. I'd like you to all stand up and try to sing that song. I'll try and sing as loud as I can now, and maybe I'll drown you all out. But I don't think so. You can be real loud. Are you ready? And a one and a two and a. We were sailing along on Moonlight Bay, little bit loud, can hear the voices singing. Come on, Bill. They seem to say, come on up here, Bill. You have stolen my heart. Now don't go away. As we sing love's old sweet song on Moonlight Bay, louder, on Moonlight Bay. Very good. Give yourselves a hand. Larry would be proud. You can sit down now. The only other two things I'm going to ask you to do is, first I'm going to ask you to, on the count of three, I'll get to the three in a bit, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Then I'm going to ask you to think about something. And it's going to have to do a little bit with a man who I think we all respected, but a man who a lot of us knew very well. And if we didn't, you really missed out on something, because he was a hell of a guy. Okay, countdown. This will be hard, Gav. Is Gav still here? You got to stand up and keep your eyes closed. That'll be tough, Gav. Isn't he doing a great job? Give him a hand. Give it a. That's Dr. Gavin Duke, radiologist. Show him the due respect. He's retired now. He doesn't get that respect. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Close those eyes. I'm going to repeat some words now. When you hear 3 words, a total of 3 words, that you believe it perfectly describes Larry Ethier, I want you to stand up and think of one more word and shout it out, or term or phrase that would describe Larry Ethier. I'll start and I'll go slow. I think this crowd needs a little slowness. You can laugh, that's okay. First word, outgoing. Second word, kind. Third word, generous.
Beautiful. A winner. Joyful. Exuberant.
Competitive.
Interesting.
Louder. Happy fun down front.
Inspiring.
Nice and loud.
You're the supporter. Comedic.
What was that? Caring.
Big-hearted.
Big-hearted. Fun. Sunshine. Dare I say athletic? Family-oriented. Better golfer than Gavin Duke.
Ahead of his time, but classic.
Wow. Come on, there's more.
Crazy socks.
Happy
Happy socks.
thoughts.
Socks.
Tenacious. Wise. Ambitious. Mentoring.
Folk-fest addict.
Folk-fest addict. Funny. Good looking. Still looks the same as he did in grade 10. Passionate. Loves candy. Chocolate.
Cinnamon buns.
Cinnamon buns. I'll say onions because I was one of those poor people that worked at the Pelican in the summertime, and I'd come home and Linda would say, "Where have you been?" Because you'd smell of onions head to toe. There are so many words. You can sit down now, that those that are standing. There are so many words that you can think of when you think of Larry. He was simply one of the most amazing people I had ever met. And I'm proud to have mentioned him and the words good friend in the same tone. We all should be so lucky to know a Larry Ethier in our lives. So this was to be a celebration of life. And that's what Larry represents to me. When you think of Larry not being with us, it's a very sad thing, but it's something that surprises most people. Larry's the kind of person that you just imagine will live forever. And for me and for guys like Bill and Gavin and his closest friends, and certainly all his family members, he will live forever because of the kind of man he was and he is in our minds. He represented just about everything that was good. He knew how to have a good time, but when to draw the line. He knew how to inspire. He knew how to get other people to aspire to things that were greater than they were. He knew how to get a collective group of individuals to view the world as it's a whole, it's a team, and we succeed as a team. I asked him one time how many provincial championships he had won. He said, I think it was 8 or 9, and I just about fell off my chair. And I was in much better shape then. And I said, 8 or 9? I said, you know how many people would jump up and down and say 1 and think it was an accomplishment? He said, oh, well, the teams were good. The teams play the games, Bill. I didn't play the games. I just brought the balls. And that's kind of, and Larry had the nuance to have double entendre in there too as well. I just wanted to say, Gavin, you don't have to sing, but you probably want to just say a word or two about Larry. They're done. Okay, thank you very much for taking a little bit too much time, Billy, but thank you for the opportunity. And thanks to Deb and the family.
Billy, you were awesome. Thank you, Billy. Billy is also an amazing friend, and truly was. I think he's a very wise person who has been the keeper of friendships for many of us for so long. And thank you, Bill. That was fantastic. Back to the program. Larry returned to the U of A after his adventure in Crete, and he decided to complete an after-degree education diploma. And in 1970, took a job as a science teacher at Queen Elizabeth Junior High in Wetaskiwin. The weekend before he was to begin his new job, though, although he'd seen Deb all year long, he finally asked her out for the first time. She was busy. But she was good enough to ask Larry out the next weekend. It was an epic first night date, but the next day clinched the deal. Their continued love affair has been one that all of us had admired and aspired to. Larry lived in a basement suite and obviously desperately missed Deb while he was in Wetaskiwin, because the following summer, they were married. Deb spent the following year driving back and forth from Wetaskiwin to the U of A while completing her education degree. Larry had now joined the Charter clan. And to speak of Larry as a brother-in-law, is Deb's sister, Trish. I'm good.
I'm going to smile, Bill. Russ and I, Babs and Bill, Bobby and Rick, Bob and Annette, and all of our families are at a loss. Lair is our brother-in-law. However, right from the start, Lair was our brother, uncle, our friend. He was like sunshine. His nephews and nieces say that he had an uncanny ability to ask the right questions, had an unbiased ear, and a loving and caring nature that put everyone at ease and made everyone feel special. I was 11 when I met Larry. Right from the start, OMG, he was fun. Had that big toothy grin, so handsome, that wonderful magical presence, a voice like no other, and he loved Deb. That was so visible. Did I say patient? Because he had to be with me. Deb's little sister. Thank you, Lair, for that. Well, I was the third wheel and the little sister he never had. There were so many road trips. One in particular was when Deb and Lair and I went to Larry's cousin's, Mo's, wedding in Vancouver. We drove in Deb and Lair's station wagon. I remember saying, "Where are we going? Where are we going to go to sleep?" I brushed my teeth at a gas station, and then Larry parked the car in a residential area. Larry told me that I would be sleeping in the front seat, and he and Deb in the back of the station wagon. Well, I must have said something, maybe complained a little bit, and within a few seconds, Larry was in the front seat, arms wrapped around the steering wheel, legs going every which way, and I was being the little, maybe whiny sister, but I was comfy and cozy next to my sister in the back. Larry, not a word of complaint, talked, hummed, and sang us all the way to Mo's wedding. Who does that? Only Larry, the optimist. That would be a good word, optimist, and I know it is. By now I'm a teenager, and I'm spending many weekends with them. Who wouldn't want it when it meant the infamous candy cupboard, movies, games, and just being with them, Deb and Lair. As I grew, Deb and Lair continued to be a shining light and an integral part of my life. A Sunday family dinner with the Ethiers and the Charters. Larry asked me how I felt about my tests. I was writing my Bio and Chem 30 exams that week. He could tell by my body language, not so good. Of course I hadn't studied, and he asked what he could do. Please, Lair, 1 hour. He taught me in 1 hour all I needed to know. I proceeded to pass all my exams because Lair had a gift. I'm a teacher, just like my brother Lair and my sister. I know it won't surprise you that they have both volunteered in my grade 2 class. Mrs. E on a regular basis and Mr. E at the drop of the hat would come in when we needed him. Not surprising at all. I know, that's what you're all thinking. He loved attending our writing celebrations, and for read-in week, he most definitely had the best expression. The students loved his robot voice. I went to school and told Team 2 about Mr. E. One of my students asked if they could all write to Mrs. E and fill her bucket. The letters written by 7- and 8-year-olds showed the impact Lair and Deb had on them. Another one of my students asked if gifted would be a good way to describe Mr. E. A tear trickled down my cheek, and I looked into his eyes. We discussed the synonyms: talented, skilled, exceptional, extraordinary, remarkable. Lair, you are all of that and more. And so are your children, Mel, Neil, and Luke. We love you. We cherish our family time. We miss you dearly and want you to know that the love of your life, our sister, will be in good hands. As a young girl, Larry always pointed to and talked to me about the constellations. When I look up, I won't see or even know all the constellations. I did try, Lair. I will only see one star, and that's you, Lair. We love you.
Great job, Trish. Again, back on script. Over the next 20 years, Larry and Deb designed and built a house, taught school, had 3 incredible children, Mel in 1974, Neil in 1976, and Lucas in 1979. Both Larry and Deb believed that the best 3 moments of their lives when they first saw their 3 babies. Over the next few years, Larry completed his ed degree and master's degree. He acquired the Pellick Inn. The inn became a fixture, as we've heard before, at Klondike Days, where Larry and Deb fed breakfast to K-Day workers early in the morning and fed them a late dinner after the fair closed. That's aside from all of the hot dogs, hamburgers, fries, and corn on the cob to the masses that they sold every day. The kids grew up working at those fairs, and they've had a huge impact on them as well. I even have an apron at home because my dad at one time worked at the original Pellick Inn, and it says, "They're already ready and they're all red hot." And it was from a long, long time ago. During this time, though, Larry mastered his craft as a teacher. He shared his warm, caring nature with his students and naturally became a lifelong mentor to many. To speak of Larry as a mentor is Paul Green.
This thing is, he's fascinating, this thing, yeah. They used to make them, there we go, I just got it. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ethier, for giving me the honor to be able to say a couple words about Larry. Sometimes it only takes one. How many of you here have had someone who believed in you, who really saw you and even stood for you when it seemed like nobody else would, had your back? For many of us here, that person is Larry, Mr. E. For me, that person is most definitely Larry Ethier. Our friendship started 1989. It was beginning of high school. He was my biology teacher and coach and vice principal and a mentor to me even at that early part in grade 10. And at the time seemed like my only ally. He was the answer to all of my parents' prayers. As I seemed to find getting into trouble extremely easy, all the time, couldn't find my way through high school without being at the principal's office regularly. Larry saw something in me that no one else did. And he stuck his neck out for me to keep me from being expelled or suspended many times. He taught me a lot through those years of being a young man, having integrity, sharing the hard stuff with my parents, telling them what I would have never, ever told my parents. Larry brought my mom and dad in and had me sit down and share with them. And from that day, I've had an incredible relationship with my parents. I'm really not sure how my life would have turned out had Larry not taken the time to see some good and to see through what I was putting out for the world to see, but see something inside of me and believe in me. And he found a way to make me believe in myself as well. Larry remained my good friend and my mentor, my ally over the last 25 years. I was lucky enough to see him in Osaka. I was living in Tokyo and he was south, and he came when my son was born in New York. He came, I saw him and Deb in Vancouver for a nice lunch, and anytime I was home, we would find a way to see Larry and Deb. And they even came just recently to see my mom when she was in the hospital. I could call Larry whenever I was in trouble, even as I was in my 20s and in my 30s. And when my son was going through a really hard time in school, I fortunately could call Larry and ask his advice. And he told me a story of a school that he was at in Dubai that he was asked to chaperone for just a year. And they only said, don't change anything in that year. And from what I heard, Larry got there, and from what Larry told me, there was suspension and people were being expelled and bullying, and the school wasn't functioning at all. And one of the things that Larry did in that school was had the kids come up with their own consequence, teaching them early how to be responsible for their actions. And Larry did not directly tell me what to do with my son, Oliver, but shared that story, and I was like, brilliant. So I took my son and got down on his level, and we came up with a consequence for what he was doing. Transformed the way I parent my son to this day. That is how we work through things that come up with my son. I empower him to be responsible for his own actions, and I got that directly from Larry. So imagine in a room this size, if each of us here took a page from Larry's playbook and would see the good in people, not the bad, would see the gold in people and take the time to care the way that Larry did. What a difference that world would look like. Sometimes it only takes one. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was fantastic. You know, Larry always claimed, as you've heard before, that he wasn't a particularly good athlete. But he was a great sports enthusiast. Nobody knew more about the Oilers, the Eskimos, nobody had more ideas about what they could do to be better. You know, fortunately for young athletes in Wetaskiwin, Larry was assigned in his first year at Queen Elizabeth to coach in junior boys volleyball team. You know, since he was a natural strategist, an analyst, the ultimate power of positive thinking guy, he was destined to become a great coach. He made Wetaskiwin a powerhouse in volleyball, and over the next 20 years led his teams, as Bill said, to many provincial championships. Last year, he was inducted into the Wetaskiwin Sports Hall of Fame. Natalie Reimer Anderson is going to speak to us about Coach E and the impact he had on his athletes.
Thank you, Ethiers, for this opportunity. Some lives are lived as expressions of love. Some lives are lived as an invitation to a greater possibility of what life can be. And that was the life of Larry Ethier, Coach E. Volleyball was simply a means to be of service to the lives of the young people he coached. He was not simply a championship coach. He was a champion of the heart. All the trophies and all the awards pale in comparison to the impact of his love, compassion, respect, and unconditional positive regard that he had for his players. Coach E believed in our greatness before we could. He held us in the highest vision of ourselves until we rose to meet it. He had us all buy in wholeheartedly to a shared vision of what we could achieve if we worked together as a team. Good, better, best. Never let it rest until the good is better, until the better best. This was his favorite motto, not meant in a relentless pursuit of never being good enough, but rather in a striving to reach the highest heights of our potential. Coach E struck the perfect balance between the discipline of self-mastery and the fine art of not taking ourselves too seriously. This was, after all, a game, and we needed to be reminded often by him belting out Cool in the Gang's Celebrate Good Times that we need to celebrate. We get to do this. He wouldn't let us forget that the journey was the reward. These hours spent in the gym weren't just a means to an end. These were the moments that make a life. Every contact, every practice, every stare, and yes, every floorboard. It was all part of the joy of the experience. One night on our way home from a tournament in North Battleford, with Rita McNeil playing on the stereo, he pulled the van over to the side of the road and insisted that we all stop to see this. So a van full of sleepy, irritated teenage girls was looking up at the night sky. And I recall looking over at him, this grown man staring at the sky, awestruck, looking heavenward. And by the time I got back in the van, I think he had us all convinced that that sky was put there for us to see. This man's legacy could be measured in trophies and championships. We know there certainly was a lot of winning, but we are all here today as his living legacy of Coach's love. He would say, hands down, that we are his greatest reward. During 4A provincials, we lost a match in the round robin, and we gathered in the band room, shaken and deflated, feeling like the dream was over. But I remember Coach E's words, "Ladies, what's done is done. It's in the past. All you can control is how you respond. Will you let this defeat you, or will you pick yourself up, get back out on the court, and go for it?" You choose how you respond. And with those words, we went out and made history. May we all be empowered by our choice in how to respond. And may we all be a Coach E in someone else's life. May we all remember to celebrate good times. And may we all take time to look heavenward and to be awestruck by the stars. Thank you.
That was brilliant, thank you. Larry's influence wasn't limited to students and athletes, although it's obviously immense. His good friend, Wayne Nielsen, will speak about Larry's impact on teaching and schools in the Wetaskiwin area.
And once again, the microphone is too high. Thank you. Yeah, we're laughing down here. Right, Deb? To the Ethiers, thank you for this opportunity. Anyone who ever met Larry Ethier, either for the first time or at any time, was greeted by a guy with a certain sparkle, certain charisma, a big, broad, sincere smile, a warm hug or handshake, and you might even be called Bud or partner. But after spending any time with him, you were always left with the feeling this was a guy who was really special, that you would really, really like, trust, and look forward to spending more time with in the future. Sorry, Mike, I'm stealing one of your minutes. Larry loved to have fun, as was mentioned. And I remember a staff party at Pat Jevney's acreage. And after a couple of soft drinks, Patricia asked if anybody would like to ride her horses. They wouldn't be saddled up because it's just too much work. You'd have to ride bareback. And Larry looked at me and said, "You up for it?" Well, I'd been fortunate enough to ride a little bit as a kid, but I had no idea if Larry ever had. And I asked him, "Have you ever ridden a horse?" He said, "Well, it's been quite some time." Now, I don't know if that meant he rode yesterday or whether he had never ridden at all. But we mounted our big steeds and turned the horses away from the barn and headed out into the pasture. It was getting dark. We were pretty comfortable because we were two of Wetaskiwin's finest cowboys. And we rode for quite a long ways. We probably talked about school a little bit. We certainly talked about what great horsemen we were as we kicked our horses into a very gentle and slow trot. But my goodness, when we turned those horses around and they headed home, their heads went down, their ears went flat back, and each horse was in its own personal Kentucky Derby. Now, my horse was behind Larry's, and while I was hanging on for dear life, I had the great opportunity to watch him hang on for dear life. And what I saw is this great big tall man lying flat on top of the horse, grabbing the mane. I'm not even sure if he remembered to hang on to the reins. And he hooked both of his feet behind the horse's rear end. And he wobbled to and fro as he maintained balance heading back to the farm. The horse came to a screeching halt in the yard, and Larry quickly sat up on his horse. And someone yelled, "How was the ride?" And Larry looked at him and said, "Exhilarating." In Wetaskiwin, Larry was called Mr. E, or just plain E. If you lived in Wetaskiwin while Larry and Deb and family were living there, you either had your own personal E-story, knew someone who had an E-story, but you most certainly had heard an E-story. So how is it that someone could come into a small community become so well known, so well liked, respected and trusted, but most importantly, so importantly influential. I believe that answer comes with one of his sayings, and it's on the back of his bulletin. Natalie spoke about it. Good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good is better and the better best. You see, in that saying, there's only positive statements, and Larry lived that positivity. He was a champion for all his students. He had high standards for student behavior and student performance, both on the court and in the classroom. He viewed all his students as inherently good and knew with a little bit of help and guidance, each one of them could become a little bit better. Better students, better athletes, certainly better people. And he also said if you could move students from being good people to better people, if you invested more time and energy, can't you move them from being better people to the best that they can be? He connected to students. They knew he cared about them and he cared for them. And in return, as you've already heard, they rose to the challenge of meeting his expectations. They believed in themselves because he believed in them. As a result, many students overcame very significant personal obstacles, or they met previously unattainable goals. But Larry is also a champion for school staff. And until you've seen him teach, you have no idea what an outstanding teacher and mentor he was. He was supportive, sharing and caring, and collaborative with all his colleagues. He could empathize with fellow teachers who were struggling with misbehaving students or unsupportive parents. He never imposed judgment on the teacher, the student, or the parents. He was never intrusive. But when he was asked for assistance, he would work tirelessly with all the people involved to find a solution to that problem. And he always found solutions that worked for every one of them. These are the stories that would be shared between students, between parents, between teachers, between CUNY members. His reputation as a teacher and administrator and as just one of the finest human beings grew with each new success story. And the number of success stories grew and grew and grew. As you know, Larry was a people person. Every person he ever met was important to him, and he wanted to get to know them on a personal level. Relationship building was a superlative strength of his. But his relationship maintenance is why many of us are here today. Larry not only built those relationships, but he was the rare person who nurtured and maintained them for a lifetime. As you see, Larry just didn't have an impact on Wetaskiwin while he lived there and worked there. E-stories continue. Life lessons he taught and mentored wove themselves throughout the community, as attested to today. And as he traveled abroad, those e-stories unfolded in every community he ventured into. Larry's no longer here. But I can say that whoever the welcoming committee was that met Larry and his new community, they met a guy with a special sparkle. A big, broad, welcoming smile, a warm hand, a warm hug or handshake. Most likely they got a hug. They might even have been called bud or partner. But every member of that welcoming committee was certainly left with a feeling that this was a guy they were going to really like and trust and would look forward to spending more time with to create great memories for themselves. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did. Thank you, Wayne, on so many levels. Yes. Yes. After meeting Chris Thompson during his master's year, a seed was planted in Larry's mind for an international adventure. In 1992, he and Deb went to a hiring fair in Boston. A week later, well on their annual Wetaskiwin-Kimberley ski trip, they got a call from Osaka International School asking if they would sign a contract there to teach in the fall. All of us here were incredulous as they sold their family home, Wetaskiwin, said goodbye to their family dog Daisy, who was 14 years old at the time. She spent her golden years with her dearest friends, Cy, Joyce, Ryan, and Tim Frank in Calgary. The ever-positive Larry, with Deb's support, said, "Overseas adventure, here we come." To speak about their time in Osaka is one of Larry's first students there, Dan Morocco.
I was so very fortunate to meet Larry in 1993 when my parents moved our family to Japan to teach at Osaka International School. The Ethiers were our welcoming committee. They had made the same move 1 year earlier, and as a 13-year-old kid, having never lived outside of Texas, to say I was experiencing culture shock is an extreme understatement. But having Larry there as a teacher and refuge and mentor quickly made it feel like home to me and my family. At OIS, he was a clear favorite of both the students and the faculty. His larger-than-life personality was integral to the culture of our young school. His smile was a fixture in the hallways. As a teacher, Larry set the standard for academic excellence at the school. His biology class was the most interesting and definitely the most challenging class I've ever taken, even all through college and everything. He always demanded your very best effort in all things, which sounds like a lot, but it was really easy because he always gave you his very best effort at all times. As a coach, Larry quickly took the volleyball team from last place to first place, no doubt aided by his star Canadian imports, Lucas and Neil. In fact, his volleyball teams won all 7 tournaments they played in his 5 years in Osaka. There was real excitement when we got there about the volleyball team that was suddenly excellent. But I was a transplanted Texan teenager, and to me, volleyball was still a sport for girls. I didn't want to have any part of it. But Larry managed to convince me in my second year there to join the volleyball team. And it was one of the most special experiences of my life. Volleyball is really a sport about teamwork. That's really the heart of it. But some of our guys didn't speak English, and some of us didn't speak Japanese, and poor Puria didn't speak either when he started. That was the amazing thing about Larry. His love and enthusiasm transcended language and cultural barriers. He could take a group of kids from all over the world and turn them into a winning team. He made us a far better team than we had any business being, given our very modest athletic ability. He had this rare ability to nurture and enrich people's true potentials and transform the ordinary into champions. I tried to think of what it was that he said to us that really helped us excel. And I think he said to each one of us, he treated us as individuals to create the team. He said to each one of us what we needed to hear. What he said to me was, get that pole out of your butt and get down on defense. Which has been an amazing life lesson, not only on the volleyball court, but it's what I needed to hear. I've been back in touch with a lot of the guys from the volleyball teams this week. Guys spread all around the world, New York to Tokyo to Tehran, all wanting to thank Larry for his powerful guidance, his loving friendship, and for setting the gold standard in our minds of how to live a life. It's been 20 years since we lived in Osaka together, and Larry's impact on my life is still tremendous. He taught me how to expect excellence from myself, and that I could have so much fun working to achieve that excellence. I know the impact he had on our little community in those 4 years that I was there, 5 years total. And I know he spread that. He went on to spread that around the world. He meant so very much to me and has had such a lasting impact on my life. But I didn't become a professional volleyball player. I'm not a biologist or a doctor, but I am a dad. And my greatest hope is to be the kind of dad Larry was. He was a role model, a teacher, a leader, your head cheerleader, and your best friend. And it's a ridiculously high bar to set for myself, but Larry only ever asked for my best. Thank you, Larry.
Our Larry, what a man. Larry and Deb moved from Osaka, I think, to Taiwan, and met Mike Part, who taught with them there and followed them to Kenya. Mike is going to speak to us about Larry's incredible impact on international schools and education.
Again, thank you for the honor of being able to speak about a few words to Larry and Deb in their international careers. Our family had the pleasure of first meeting Larry and Deb when they arrived in Taipei in 1997. They were introduced to the TIS faculty. Larry is the associate principal of the upper school, and Deb in the lower school teaching grade 4. Our friendship with Larry and Deb began quite naturally, as with all Albertans, we had that itching, burning question. So, do cars really cost less than Wetaskiwin? With that typical and soon to be often recognized twinkle in his eye and his trademark smile, Larry replied, sometimes, if your good friends own the car dealerships. Overseas, colleagues often become friends, and friends often become family. We were most fortunate that our close relationship with Larry and Deb continued throughout our years together, in Taipei, then Nairobi, and at home in Edmonton. Our sons, Graydon and Connor, have continued to benefit from Larry's sage advice and fatherly influence throughout their lives, from their early childhood to their adulthood. As upper school associate principal at TIS, Larry initiated a respect program, much as you've heard from earlier speakers today, wherever he went. He was highly valued by staff and students. One of Mr. E's early practices was greeting students, parents, and staff as they walked by the upper school office every morning. This caught on with all of the administrators at TIS, as they too witnessed the positive effect that Mr. E's efforts had on the entire school. Larry welcomed advice and role modeling from his principal, Ed Ladd, and his superintendent, Mark Alferts, helping him become an effective international leader. But we know that they too learned a great deal from Larry. Ed shared with us, Larry demonstrated empathy for people. He understood that academics were only a part of our mission as educators, and that equally important was creating a strong foundation for students just to be good people who contribute positively to their communities. Larry was an exemplary educator and an exemplary person. I've never worked with anyone better. Larry was often quite quiet about stories, and he and Deb had so many secrets. And sometimes it might have been the red wine, but sometimes Deb would kind of spill the beans, and she'd get that look from Larry, and then we didn't really get the details. Anyway, this is one that we were very happy to hear about, and I can only share it now with you because several years have passed. As we all know, timing is everything, and this is definitely verified in Taipei, when Larry set out with his admin colleagues to get his Taiwanese driver's license. A year earlier, I too was faced with this daunting task, and I knew Larry would be just fine. I went to the hospital, bent my knees, and I flicked my fingers, and I got 100%. However, a year later, poor Larry had to drive a car through a difficult obstacle course, seemingly narrowed to motorcycle width. Numerous crushed pylons scattered along the course did not reflect his excellent driving skills, but it did relegate Larry and Deb to taking taxis for the duration of their time in Taipei. Deb may have let this story slip, but it remained a sworn secret within our family for years, and now you all know. Larry was a role model for food and fitness. In Taipei, Larry and Deb would routinely explore hole-in-the-wall restaurants in their neighborhood. They didn't cook much. They then paid for those extra calories every Sunday morning with jogs up and much slower walks down the grueling 1,000 steps on Yamingshan Mountain. And we all know Larry had a great sense of humor. Larry and Deb's love for travel almost made the Guinness Book of Records. Their trip to India with admin colleagues sadly began without an entry visa, and thus became the shortest tour of the country by any citizen of a Commonwealth nation. When we asked them about their trip, again that twinkle and that smile reappeared. Larry said, "The airport was a little crowded, but very nice." Of course, Larry was also proud of his Canadian heritage. They helped host our annual Canadian Thanksgivings, both in Taipei and Kenya. And being an administrator, he got a real oven. So he became the turkey man. He relished the opportunity to provide, cook, and carve the bird, and he always made great soup with the leftovers. Larry and Deb headed off to ISK, International School of Kenya, in 2000, where Larry assumed the responsibilities as upper school principal, and Deb again taught grade 4. Under Mr. E's leadership, ISK instituted a mandatory community service component as a graduation requirement, as well as an honors graduate diploma. Mr. E expanded the intercultural program to include all upper school students for a week without walls. It was an intercultural trip, allowing our mostly expat students to experience Kenyan culture at the grassroots level. Building community in his faculty was a true passion for Larry. And every summer back in Edmonton, he would gather themed party costumes and goodies to host his annual back-to-school bash with his high school staff. Each fall, it was the talk of the school, anticipating the fun event for their kickoff. In Nairobi, Larry's passion for golf was but 6 minutes from home. But this caused him considerable angst. Almost every morning before work, he and Deb would head to Windsor to work out, 5 a.m. Pretty dark in Africa at 5 a.m. No opportunity to play a few holes, just far too dark. However, he did make it out to Windsor on weekends as much as possible. Larry shared teachable moments. For the uninitiated, I was uninitiated. He passed on a valuable 4x4 tip that I've never forgotten. Mike, remember, it is far better to manually lock in your front hubs before you're in 3 feet of water. This is especially true if you're stuck in a Kenyan river. I wasn't there, but it sounded really exciting. Larry loved negotiating pretty much everything and anything. Larry had several opportunities to negotiate his way out of traffic tickets. In Nairobi, random stops usually ended up with the driver buying lunch for the hungry policeman. Larry accepted that cultural reality, but he always tried negotiating for the appetizer or the dessert, and he rarely paid for the entree. However, one persistent sergeant, complete with his AK-47, challenged Larry's patience and negotiating skills. Larry's SUV was blue with a white roof, as was every police SUV in Kenya. This guy wanted Larry to paint his truck another color. Negotiations continued for weeks at an intersection near the school. Sometimes Larry would drive the truck, then he'd take the car for a couple days just to put the guy off. Anyway, just as Larry was resigned to comply, because Nairobi jails are never a positive cultural experience, the sergeant was transferred to a new post and the problem solved. Mr. E was finally regarded by students, staff, and parents, a testimony from ISK Superintendent Monica Greeley. And I'll try and get through this. Dearest Larry, for a week now I have found it hard to compress the kaleidoscopic images of our times together into intelligible thoughts and reflections. Our friendship was strong and textured, based upon common values, the capacity to work hard and party well, and the constant awareness of how blessed we were with our families, our dream admin team, friends at ISK, and the luxury of being members of a broad, loving community spanning continents. But in truth, let's admit to this early on, it all came down to brownies and red wine. And Deb, you're supposed to be nodding your head to that. Good memories. Larry, above all, your legacy is that of a principled principal, a man who modeled the values you wished to imbue in the students under your watch. Your sense of humor was infectious, but even more compelling was that you were naturally a positive, good-natured man. Equally, you were a caring, valued, and valuable friend. Off to Ouagadougou in 2005, Burkina Faso. As the director of school, Mr. E was awarded the National Order of Burkina Faso for the integration of international and local educational opportunities. This award basically named Larry as an honorary citizen. He was also worked with the government to initiate a 4-year full-ride scholarship for 2 local students every year. This scholarship continues to function today. As a colleague from Burkina noted, Mr. E was the only school director to be decorated by the government with this prestigious award for his commitment to education. During Larry's tenure in Ouaga, he facilitated a 42% increase in student population over 3 years. He loved his Oilers, as we all know, and during the 2006 Oiler run to the Cup, he greeted his students every morning, much as he did in Taipei, but he was wearing his Oiler jersey. All of his international students in this small West African country knew all about the Oilers and the Stanley Cup. Larry and Deb returned home to Edmonton for a couple of years as an officially retired couple. Not really. His international reputation for excellence and the lure of life overseas couldn't be resisted, so off they went again. At the American School of Dubai, Larry accepted the role of interim high school principal. He was hired to keep the status quo, as mentioned, but in true Larry fashion, transformed the high school, and his lasting impact is still felt there. Mr. E brought a level of warmth, friendship, and respect when ASD needed it most. Monica Medina felt blessed to have worked on the admin team with Larry in both Dubai and Kenya, and shares her thoughts. To me, Larry was the consummate teacher. You've heard the phrase, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. I often tell people that. Everything I know about high schools, I learned from Larry Ethier. He taught me much about the logistics of how a high school works, but beyond that, Larry taught me something so much more important. He taught me about the heart and soul of a school, the relationships between the staff, administration, and the students. In 2013, after another brief sojourn into retirement, Larry again felt that pull of teaching overseas and headed off to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam to consult at the Lawrence S. Ting School. Larry revamped the English language program and was responsible for hiring international teachers for those programs. He also recruited teachers for one of their schools in China. Larry was so well regarded internationally that beginning in Kenya, he led school board training sessions for international schools in many African countries. He also served on accreditation teams, providing an analysis of a school's success in meeting its own goals and objectives as defined by its strategic plan. Larry's reputation as an educational leader often had other heads of schools contacting him for advice on many topics. The news of Mr. E's passing spread over social media. Hundreds of posts from former students and colleagues across the globe reflected on his positive influence on both their personal and professional lives, and are a true testament to his legacy. Larry was an exceptional mentor who inspired both students and colleagues, a caring leader who shared his love of learning and of life. He was a very special friend to so many.
All we're going to do now is wrap up. We're going to ask if Mel and Neil and Lucas and Deb could come up and say a few words to conclude our program. We'll follow that by a video tribute.
As the baby of the family, I get to speak first here. On behalf of Mom, Mel, Neil, and our entire family, we wanted to thank everyone here and everyone around the world who have been sharing in our pain, our love, and have sent so many notes and memories about our dad. We all knew he had an incredible effect on so many people through his 69 years, but it has been overwhelming for us to see just how far and how deep his message and impact reached. In reflection, it's clear to us that our dad was extremely humble. He told me 3 weeks, I think, before he was getting inducted to the Wetaskiwin Sports Hall of Fame in the middle of a discussion about the Oilers, and we haven't even seen his medal for the Order of Burkina Faso. To him, it was really not about the result or the recognition. It was about the act, the relationships. He lived in the present. He was an extremely good person. In memory of Dad, I want to ask everyone in the room and everyone who sees this recording to think about that phone call, that lunch, that person you've been meaning to connect with, but life has gotten in the way. In memory of Dad, make that connection. Be present in the moment and nurture an important relationship in your life. Have that person pass it on. That will continue the legacy that our dad left. In closing, I want to read a card that I recently found in his special drawer. It was a card that I gave to him last Father's Day. It was perfect. So, on the cover it said, "To my mentor, my coach, my touchstone, my friend. That's you, Dad." And I wrote, "Thank you for everything. You are and have always been an amazing dad, something I'm striving to emulate. I love you."
My life is my message. Gandhi. Over the last week, we have been going through many old photos, videos, and documents. We were deciding on what to put on the top of the program when I came upon this quote, written in his easily recognizable, slanted left-handed handwriting. I read it out, and all four of us said yes. It was perfect. How Dad lived his life was his message of believing in people. He made people better around him. He was so proud of his 6 kids, of Mom, of his 7 grandkids. We will continue to live his message.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Your love and support means so much to our family. We've really received so many messages. We can't get through them all. So when I found out I was in Vietnam, I came home as fast as I could. I had a 24-hour journey, and I really wanted to write a poem for my dad. Many of you know that he really loved to write poems for people. Probably some of you have received them that are here. His volleyball players, his students, his teams, his colleagues. And I can remember him spending hours crafting these poems, making sure they rhymed, that they had some humor, and they truly showed how he felt. And they were a gift from his heart. So, Dad, I have spent hours trying to write a poem for you today, and I wanted it to be perfect. but it's not quite ready. So I'll work on it. It's going to be called I Am My Father's Daughter. And it will be a poem about how you are my hero and my best friend, my go-to. And it will include some humor about how I'm really proud to have your Ethier nose and how I love your nose, Dad, and how I have lived really trying to be the best person that I can, just like you've shown me. So from the top of my head and the bottom of my heart to the tips of my toes, I love you, Daddy, and you walk with me now. So let's all walk with a little bit of Dad in us, a little bit of Larry, a little bit of E, because the world will be a better place.
I had these few words in my head, and I hope they're still there. I was so lucky to be born into a wonderful family, the Charter family, and they're all here except for one brother who we know wishes he was here. And I love you all, and he loved you all. But the best thing that ever happened to me in my life was meeting and marrying Larry. He was so positive, and he was my rock, he was my star. And in our life together, the best days of our lives were September 2nd, 1974, when Melanie Jane was born, May 17th, 1976, when Neil David was born, and June 4th, 1979, when Lucas Paul was born. And then we went on to live a wonderful, wonderful life, and our family expanded to include all these wonderful people over here. I have to step it back a bit, because that was also when I did marry Larry. I married into the most wonderful family, and 3 of them were over here. If anybody knew Leo and Verna, you'd know exactly what I'm saying. And all the times together as families, my family has grown on, and I'm just so proud of all of them, and I'm so happy that I had the time I did. I wished it was 20 more years, but we're all going to be brave, and we're going to live on and make him proud for wherever he is. We love you, Larry.
And now we're going to have a video presentation. Following the video presentation, if you proceed out of the auditorium and go to the left down the hall, there's a reception area with lots of food, lots of drink. All of us here have Larry's stories. That's why we're here. The portrait that's been painted today of Larry is a remarkable one of a remarkable human being. And we get to share them in the spirit that Larry would enjoy. A little bit of laughter, lots of enthusiasm, and just a continued reflection of an amazing man. So now the video presentation.
Heartbeat, why do you miss when my baby kisses me?